Hi, everyone. My name is Lillian Sims. I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of Kentucky in the Department of Educational Policy Studies and Evaluation. And I'm here today to share just a little bit of my doctoral research. This is the beginning of a paper about non-traditional trajectories into medical training. I'm calling it Stumbling into Medical School. I'll be the first to admit that I did not tailor this presentation to the theme for this graduate student conference because it's actually a little premature for me. I just finished data collection, primarily with Zoom interviews last month. So right now I'm really in the weeds on data analysis, and I wanted to just share a little bit about how I'm organizing my data for this project. So for that reason, I'm kind of skipping over my theoretical foundations and my literature and focusing on findings organization. Of course, I'm happy to talk more in person about those things. Just for context, my dissertation is on social diversity in medicine, and in particular, I'm looking at the experiences of medical school students who identify for various reasons as outsiders, social outsiders, in their medical training. A lot of times that's students who came to medical school a little bit later, who come from first gen backgrounds, minoritized backgrounds, rural backgrounds, or just people who didn't grow up around doctors. And so, very broadly, that's who I'm looking at for my dissertation. And the piece I'm talking about today is a small part of that. So here are the research questions I'm currently working with in my data set. Number one, at what point do medical students choose to become physicians? Number two, what sparks that change in trajectory if students originally planned for another career? What makes them decide to be physicians instead? And number three, kind of the most in-depth question for me right now is how do those late deciders, which is just students who chose the career after high school, potentially differ from early deciders or people who chose in high school or sooner? And that's both for the undergraduate stage and for once they're in their medical training. Just briefly, this is, like I said, part of a larger data set for me. So I've got survey data from two cohorts of medical school students and interview data from those same two cohorts. But I'm primarily using for this piece about 20 interviews with students who chose their career a little bit later than a lot of their peers. Answering research question one was pretty straightforward because I was able to ask the class of 2023 at the University of Kentucky College of Medicine specifically when in their lives they chose to pursue their careers. So anecdotally, we kind of feel that a lot of doctors chose their career early, and my survey data, which is representative, about 70% of that cohort supports that. So 60% of students who responded to my survey said that they had chosen their future career as a physician before entering college, half of those before entering high school. And only about 1 in 5 students chose after the sophomore year of college. So it was quite rare to have a student go all the way through college or even more than halfway through college before deciding on a medical career. Answering the second question was also fairly straightforward. What factors spark students' career interests? I polled a lot of students about what factors to potentially consider on the survey for this, and then these are the factors that we listed. And then you can see them in descending order. So again, from the class of 2023, by far the most frequent response was that they were inspired by their high school or even elementary or middle school STEM classes. Also having a family member or be sick themselves when they were younger, and having a family member working in healthcare were the most common. And you'll notice that that tracks with students choosing their career early on. So if you grow up around, your mom is a nurse or your mom is a doctor, or you were sick when you were a child, those sort of influences happen early on and sometimes spark that early interest. Whereas people who chose later maybe didn't have access to some of the same opportunities or just happenstance situations that would expose them to medicine so early. Research question three is what I'm going to really dig into today. And let me preface this by saying that I'm using a lot of qualitative interview excerpts from the papers that I'm writing about this, and I do not have time to read off all the quotes to you. So feel free to come back to this video sometime and pause to read the quotes. I'm just kind of broadly showing you how I'm organizing this data analysis as I go. So for the third research question, it kind of has two parts. I'm focusing now on that part in white. How do the journeys of late deciders potentially differ from traditional early deciders? What I'm finding as I go through these interviews is that students fall into one of these two categories. They either chose to pursue medicine late as a luxury or they chose it as a necessity. So I'll talk about those now. So here's one student, Brooke, who pursued another career for a few years before deciding to return to medicine. For her, it was both an economic luxury and the luxury as a child of physicians. So she felt that she had the financial freedom to kind of have what I would call almost a starter career, things that she knew weren't permanent, but that she wanted to pursue for a year or two before kind of buckling down. And then she also acknowledged that her parents did similar things, and so she didn't feel pressure to hurry straight into medical school. This is the same student, Brooke, talking also about how she sort of had the cultural luxury to wait. So she went to college out of state, and she noted that where she went to college, it really wasn't that common for students to be pushed to go straight into their permanent careers right after college. Several students talked about how late deciding was a luxury for their own wellness or life experience. They wanted to travel, they wanted to get a master's degree that interested them or pursue other interests before returning to medical school, or they were burned out from their undergraduate experience and basically needed a little bit of a break. And this was also common. Chase is a student who decided early on to go to medical school and then kind of wavered in college. And so he decided to take a gap year both to build a stronger resume and also to just confirm that interest in medicine. So he was pretty sure he wanted to go to medical school, but working as a scribe for a year just made him a little bit more certain. So from here, the next few slides are about students who are kind of in the other category. They feel like late deciding is a necessity. Alana is a student who I'm actually using in my paper on this topic as a vignette, because if you read her story, she basically hits all these points. So here in this example, she's talking about late deciding as an economic need instead of an economic luxury. So she was having to save money just to get through her undergraduate degree, and then she took several years off after undergrad to save money to take the MCAT, save money to apply, and save money before taking out even more loans for medical school. Here's Kimberly talking, like many of my participants, about just having low exposure to medicine when she was younger. So she grew up thinking that medicine was something scary, something sad, not having any positive experiences or exposure to physicians. And she kind of had to have new experiences and new exposures in college that brought her back to the career. Here's a couple more examples of that. Those same types of students that didn't have early exposure to physicians through family members or their social circles often also needed time to just kind of funnel their way to medicine because they'd never considered it before. So Gina was the first in her family to go to college, and she had someone when she was a high schooler say, "You should be a PA." So she kind of latched onto that idea, pursued that for several years, and only after she was exposed to physicians while she was preparing to go to PA school did she realize, hey, this might actually be a better fit for me. It was also pretty frequent for students in this necessity category to be afraid of medicine, to be intimidated by it, especially again if they didn't have those social connections in the field. And so that made them more likely to kind of delay a little bit just to be sure. A few more examples of that. So here's kind of part two of that research question. How do these students' approaches differ once they are in their medical training? So Harry here is talking about one of the big differences that I noticed across most interviews, and that is that it can be a challenge to navigate the application process as a non-traditional or late deciding student. So they're coming from majors that aren't sort of pre-med majors, or in a lot of cases, they're coming from other careers or from not even being in college at the time when they make this career choice. And so going back to school and preparing for the MCAT, especially as their friends kind of moved on with their lives, was quite a challenge for a lot of these students. However, once they were accepted to medical school, there were both benefits and challenges associated with being late deciders, and especially for students that took a year or two to have a gap year, to work, to get a master's degree, or in some cases took several years to pursue other careers like starting out as teachers or nurses. So I'll talk about these briefly. A big benefit was maturity. Quite a few students said that they just felt like they grew up a lot in the year or several that they took between undergrad and medical school. Related to that is time management. A lot of them talked about how well they were able to manage the demands of studying in medical school. Erica said, "I have to study 14 hours a day. I know how to handle a 14-hour day," and a lot of those students had that benefit. Life experience, and this relates to the next slide about empathy. Students talked about being able to do things like reach out to mentors and ask for help, or reach out and ask for shadowing because they've been in professional environments where they had exposure to just kind of sticking their neck out there a little bit and not being intimidated by their superiors. And that helped them to succeed in medical education. Related to that, empathy, just having a little more life experience and in particular work experience if they'd been exposed to patients or people who were kind of not who didn't grow up like them, that tended to really help students to empathize with their first patients. Willingness to take action was a minor finding, but really interesting to me. There's a lot of traditional medical students who are going to make great leaders one day, but some of these late deciders and non-traditional students were a little quicker to take on leadership roles in medical training, especially in the first year or two, and to say things like, they wanted to affect change and change the ways in which medical school students are treated or medical training itself is run. This was a finding that there were both students who said they had lower stress and students who said they had higher stress due to this background. But Jenna was one who said that her work experience really fueled her in medical school. So she's going through these long days of studying, but thinking back on that thing that kind of drew her into medicine was something that inspired her to keep going. Here's another couple examples of that. I noticed that students who found that medical school to them was a job and not a mission, who knew that they could have done other things, tended to describe themselves as a little bit less stressed out than students who felt like this is the one thing I was meant to do. So that's something I think I'll explore as I write this up. And here are some of the challenges. This was rare, but some students said that they felt that they had a little bit of lower confidence coming from these other backgrounds, just they kind of felt like they were behind. Probably my most frequent finding was a sense of social outsiderness amongst peers. So they might get along well with attendings or residents, but they might feel a little bit of a generational gap or an experience gap around people in their cohort that sometimes made it more difficult to make friends or to find study partners, roommates, that sort of thing. There was definitely financial pressure for some students. Kirsten actually said really eloquently, she said, "I don't have rich parents." And she felt like she was kind of an outsider just because of that and described that really beautifully. Some students, like I said, are eager to be leaders and to sort of fight some of the things that they perceive as injustices or ways in which medical education needs to be changed. But at the same time, those students sometimes kind of felt pressure of the medical hierarchy that didn't jive well with their past as experts or as professionals. So Michael said he felt like medical school is the patriarchy incarnate, and he had gone from being a professional in another field to sort of being treated like a nobody, and that was really difficult for him. And finally, like I said, stress was a plus and a minus for late deciders and non-traditional students, but there were several who said that it also made them more stressed out to come from that background. And again, a lot of that was rooted in some of these other factors like senses of outsiderness or questioning, how they could sort of fit into this new field at this point. So just summing up kind of the takeaways that I'm working with right now, medical students definitely seem to choose their career at an early age based on my participants. Those who do not may feel disadvantaged during the application process. Once admitted, there are both benefits and challenges associated with being late deciders, and especially with having taken time to work, take a gap year, get a master's degree. And most notably, the thing that I want to pursue is that non-traditional and late deciding students are a really heterogeneous group. So some of them kind of come from a point of privilege and others from a point of necessity. And as my research delves into how to support these students, both before and after admission, I really want to dig into what those two groups mean and how to support each of those types of students. So like I said, I'm kind of mid-analysis. Obviously, I'm using grounded theory here, and I've got to go back and tie all this into my theoretical frameworks and do a lot of writing for the next 6 months. But I will be presenting another part of this research at AERA and just digging into analysis, and in particular, the analysis of students who are from first in family or first in medicine background. So the first in their family to pursue this type of career, to see what stands out about those students' experiences, because many of those students, they were disproportionately students who were also late deciders or non-traditionals. Thank you for your time.